Commissioner Brinkley.
I guess, I followed along and I made a couple notes here, but I come back to something that to me is still nebulous. You disagreed with Superintendent Grasmick's bold statement of if they don't perform, you withhold money. It might be very severe, but why are you throwing money into something that's not giving you the effect of benefiting the students anyway? You made the statement on the sixth principle, the governor and the General Assembly alter the architecture of the programs and or the funding as the review may require. Well, to alter it and not perhaps take it off the table is not altering it. It's reinforcing perhaps what some have criticism of. And on the 10th principle, for negative consequences, the more persistent the failure of schools, the more intense the consequences. If the part of the biggest conversation here is what we're giving, which are resources, which is translated into money many times, and we're not willing to take that off the table or in some way, shape, or form alter some behaviors because we're trying to get to a desired outcome, then what are the consequences that, because I'm not an educator, so what are the consequences that you can lay on there that, especially if we're going to try to maintain the integrity of 24 different school systems in the state, is there for the state to lay on the table?
Well, let me first say that I didn't particularly disagree with Superintendent Grasmick about withholding money. If that's a piece of the system that you decide on, then I think you ought to be able to withhold money. What I said is it wouldn't be effective. In part, you'll remember I said because nobody ever withholds money. Now, if in fact you got to the point where you were actually withholding money, it would attract attention. I still don't think in those gross terms that is nuanced enough to make the kind of difference, because the way we've always set it up is that you go back and change the master plan. And it's not enough at the school level, at the district level, to make that difference, number one. Number two, I think after you review the early mid-course correction, I think that taking money away from doing X and doing Y instead, which might totally eliminate that, makes a lot of sense. I'm not talking about just continuing to fund it by any means. I really misstated it if that's ends up being what I said. And finally, digging down more deeply, you'll find I referred euphemistically to consequences in the face of persistent failure being ones that attached to compensation and a review of employment status. Well, in my mind, on the negative side, if a school has gone 4 to 6 years or 6 to 9 years and its students have not met both of those criteria, I think things like cost of living increases ought to be suspended at least, and if at the end of the next cycle of accountability the school misses that again, though that loss of cost of living should become permanent. I think that at the end of a third year, either for a CEO, superintendent, or a principal in a school that falls into that category, those individuals, I referred to it as a change in employment status, they ought to be dismissed. So I don't shy away at all from hard-edged accountability. What I'm trying to do, though, is to frame it in a way that, in my experience at the local school level and in my experience in a state context, will be more effective than a master plan driving it with the prospect of large dollars being held or withheld. But no, if you have, when you have a chance to read the paper, there's a hard edge to it. It just gets a whole lot more, and it becomes somewhat more automatic in the process, not quite as susceptible to the give and take that takes place in the large framework.